An important part of New Zealand identity is the indigenous culture of the Maori. The first Maoris arrived in New Zealand, called Aotearoa in Maori, in canoes from their ancestral homeland of Hawaiki, eastern Polynesia, more than 1,000 years ago. Maori means normal, natural, or even ordinary in the Maori language. This is how they would distinguish themselves from the deities and the spirits of their legends. And you mentioned the Maori culture, and we see it everywhere. And also, actually, a lot of the names have, Maori in language, so to speak. Is that very much part of New Zealand? The prevalence and the language, and how are the indigenous people a part of being a New Zealander?
Well, we're a bicultural country in terms of based on that relationship. When Maori and the Crown signed what was called the Treaty of Waitangi back in 1840 to form sort of modern-day New Zealand, the indigenous population's large, so about 15% of the population's of Maori ethnicity. And if you contrast that, say, with the Aboriginal population in Australia, I think they're at about 1%, so it's quite a big and important part. Increasingly, New Zealanders can speak the local language, which is some Maori term for that is
that being
te
taught
reo.
at school as well, the Maori language?
Most kids would get some introduction. So most New Zealanders would have a basic grasp. Kia ora means hello, so and haere mai means welcome. So if they walked into an airport, they'd see a little bit of it. But I mean, English is obviously the language that everybody speaks. So they may get a little confused on some of the names. I always remember we had an Irish, my wife's of Irish stock, and she had some Irish family that came out to New Zealand. They were hitchhiking around New Zealand trying to get a free lift, and they wanted to go to a place called Wangari. Its real name is Whangarei, but obviously if you can't speak Maori, then it gets a bit confusing, but people will understand.
But how well integrated are the people, especially, for example, politically? Are there lots of Maori in politics, for example, or in other public life?
They are. So we have firstly dedicated Maori seats. Of the 120 seats in Parliament, 7 of them are dedicated to only representing Maori wards, so there'll be Maori members of Parliament representing those on the Maori roll. So you only get one vote, but you can choose to be on what we would say is the general roll or the Maori roll. So it's it's a big part of, and that's sort of reflective of modern day life. Maori are doing very, very well.
But are there still some challenges, perhaps, things that still need to be fixed or improved?
Yeah, without doubt. So if we look at, for instance, the success rate, say educational achievement or health results or whatever it might be, typically the Pākehā population has achieved better results, and that's
Pākehā
as in white Caucasian population,
thing.
European population. But we're seeing significant gains. So the Maori and Pacific population starting to see much larger numbers going to university, coming out being very successful. Our current Governor General, the Queen's representative here, is of Maori ethnicity, and increasingly through all professions we're seeing Maori doing very well. So there is a gap to close, there is a lot more work to be done, but I think for the most part we would say we're a very integrated and successful society.
Today, Maori makes up over 14% of the population. Although out of this, according to some studies, no full-blooded Maori of New Zealand exist anymore since 1987. Nevertheless, their language and culture are an important part and identity of New Zealand, and its music, arts and crafts are kept alive, such as in this Maori Arts and Crafts Institute at Te Poia in Rotorua.
Kia ora, Desi, welcome. Tēnā koe. I'm Poi Hiding. Twice on the nose. 1, 2. Kia ora.
That's a Maori.
Kia ora, te reo.
So Heidi, tell me about the Maori language. Is it still a living language? Do
Very much
people
so.
use it at home as an everyday
Yes, they do. You've got different styles of language. You've got the language that you would use in the kitchen, the language you'd use at the dining table, another language that you would use speaking to your children as their parents. But then there's a more complex language that's used either on the atea here, at formal greetings and in formal situations, and that's the language that really needs to be upheld. Lots and lots of nationalities are now getting very interested in actually learning our language. And
does that help keep the language alive?
Very much so. So you've got some of our traditionalists who say, no, this language should be just learnt by Māoris for Māori. And the majority of us are saying, actually no, the language needs to be alive. And so if there are people who want to learn the language that don't have Māori ancestry, it doesn't matter. The main thing is that the communication is there in the language.
Are the rights of the Maori people are more or less the same as everybody else?
Depends on
nowadays?
which perspective you're looking from. If you're looking from the point of a Māori and Māori rights, there's still a lot of things that need to be addressed, like the education system that's set up here. It doesn't quite fit with the way that Māori think.
I notice there are also many other Asians, for example. Is diversity part of the New Zealand culture? Is that something that that is well accepted, for example, the differences in cultures, races and religions and traditions?
Yeah, I think very much so. I mean, so I always say to people we're a bicultural country, or multicultural country based on a bicultural foundation. So Maori and the Europeans signed the treaty, formed that basis of New Zealand, but very much a multicultural society now. Of the 4.5 million New Zealanders, about 250,000 Chinese and about 110,000 Indian New Zealanders. Decent group of Indonesians. We'd welcome more. And we see ourselves...
It's only about 1,000 at the moment.
It's small at the moment, but we'd like to see more. But we see ourselves as very much as part of Asia. I mean, as from the government's point of view, our strategy is to very much try and integrate within Asia. It's both the fastest growing part of the world, and those people-to-people contacts really help us in terms of growing that relationship. So, you know, we're confident we can... represent a multicultural way of life.
But what sort of, I mean, obviously New Zealand were part of the Asia Pacific, but on the other hand it's part of the British Commonwealth. And what sort of emotional ties that most New Zealanders have with their European counterparts?
Well, because of the historical migration patterns, and still even today, Britain's still our #1 source of migrants. So it's the UK, that wider definition is #1, and then China, as I say, is #2. A lot of Australians come over as well, obviously, so there's a decent group from there. But then that historical ties with Britain is still very much there. We're a Commonwealth country.
Still very strong, for example.
Still very strong,
You don't want to, be a republic or something.
Look, I think if you were to take a poll and take the pulse of the country, I think it would sort of be 2/3, 1/3 in favour of staying with being part of the Commonwealth and being constitutional monarchy with the Queen as head of state. So there's some push to becoming a republic, but it's milder here than it is, for instance, in Australia. And I don't think we're going to become a republic anytime soon. I think probably one day we will.
But at the moment you're quite happy to be part of the British Crown.
Yeah, well, I brought back knighthoods and damehoods, actually, which was something new we did when we first became the government back in 2008, and that actually has been a very popular move. So, yeah, I think the monarchy's alive and well, and it's Jubilee year.
Especially when you have the new, Prince William and the Princess Kate.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that's very popular. They've been here twice, actually. William's been in New Zealand twice in recent times. So, and we have
the British monarchy, but in terms of sort of the global stage, because of the position of New Zealand and the Asia Pacific and the proximity to, well, you're closer to us than you are to Europe, how does New Zealand play? What kind of role does it, do you see the country play on the global stage? On the global stage?
Look, I think from New Zealand's point of view, we've always seen as a moderate sort of voice. I mean, the sort of colloquial term is the kind of the honest broker. In other words, we don't tend to, take sides so much. I think we can be seen to make our case. There are certain areas where we've led the world. We were the first country to give women the vote, for instance. We have been nuclear free, as everyone's been aware, for a very long time, since the late 80s. So there's certain times where New Zealand's taken a very strong stance, sometimes ahead of the pack. But for the most part, we're seen as a moderate, considered voice, and we're very active in the United Nations, for instance. We've been there since its inception.
But you don't sort of take side of the US policy and there's China, and there's... How do you see New Zealand sort of play in that sort of balance of these two big political powers?
Yeah, and there's always tensions. I mean, we have obviously our historical allies in those relationships. So we were once part of ANZUS, which was an agreement that bound Australia, New Zealand and the United States. Because of our anti-nuclear position, that that was suspended. But we would certainly see the United States and the UK, Australia, Canada, Britain as very much our traditional allies, and we're very like-minded in our thinking. But for instance, we have a very strong relationship with China. We were the first developed country to sign a free trade agreement with China. We've seen explosive economic growth with China, and they're our second largest market, eclipsed only by Australia. So, you know, the fact that we have that historical relationship with the US, and we would count them as extremely good friends and they're always most welcome here, it doesn't stop us having a very strong economic relationship with China.